China stretches across more land than most minds can properly hold. Deserts that swallow entire lakes, mountains that scrape the edge of breathable air, roads carved into cliffs by hands that refuse to accept no. Most people know the postcard version. The Great Wall, the skylines, the crowded streets of cities built to impress. This isn't that China. This is the China that sits behind the postcards. Villages clinging to rock faces 800 meters up. Forests where fog swallows the trail without warning. Roads with more turns than seems mathematically reasonable. Some of these places were built by necessity, carved out because there was simply no other way through. Others were shaped by belief, by ritual, by people willing to live somewhere the rest of the world wouldn't dare settle. Over the next few minutes, we're going deep into the parts of this country most travelers never see. The cliffs, the caves, the roads that test every driver who dares to cross them. This is unseen China, and some of it you genuinely won't believe is real. Biaipanjiang Bridge. From below, it barely looks like it belongs to this world. A thin line of steel strung between two mountains, suspended so high that clouds sometimes drift underneath it instead of above. Cross it by car, and the valley floor disappears fast, swallowed into a haze so far down it stops registering as distance and starts feeling like nothing at all. Engineers who worked on it talk about the wind up there, how it never really stops, how it pushes against the cables day and night, testing every joint, every weld, every calculation made on paper, long before the first beam went up. Drivers say the first crossing changes something in you. Hands tighten on the wheel without meaning to. Conversations go quiet. Even people who've driven it 100 times admit they still feel it, right at the highest point. Houtouwan plank walk. Bolted straight into the cliff face, a narrow line of wooden planks runs along the mountain with nothing beneath it but open air and a drop that doesn't end for a very long time. There's no path carved into the rock here, just boards, chains, and a few centimeters of ledge for your feet, all of it fixed to a cliff that falls away almost straight down. Climbers strap into a harness before stepping out, clipping into the chain bolted along the rock, because one slip on wet wood at this height doesn't leave room for a second chance. The wind picks up the higher you go, pressing against your back at the exact moments your grip feels least secure, boards creaking faintly underfoot with every shift in weight. People who've made the walk talk about the moment they stop looking down, not because the fear fades, but because staring at the drop makes every next step feel impossible. Reach the far end, and the temple waiting there feels like more than a destination. It feels like proof you made it across something the mountain never intended to be crossed easily. Tiger, Leaping Gorge. The river doesn't flow through this canyon so much as fight its way through it, churning white against rock walls that rise so steep the sky narrows to a ribbon far overhead. Legend says a tiger once escaped hunters by leaping clean across the gorge at its narrowest point, using a boulder in the middle of the rapids as a single, desperate foothold. Whether it's true hardly matters. The name stuck, and so did the danger it implies. Hikers who take the upper trail talk about long stretches with no railing at all, just a narrow path pressed against the cliff, the ground falling away close enough that a wrong step doesn't leave much room to recover. Rain changes this trail completely. The path turns to mud, loose rock shifts underfoot, and the same route that felt manageable in dry weather suddenly demands full attention with every stride. Down near the river itself, the roar of the water swallows every other sound. Locals warn newcomers to keep their distance. The current here is fast enough, strong enough, that getting too close has cost people their footing before. By the time hikers reach the far end, most admit the trail asked more of them than they expected. Not just the height or the exposure, but hour after hour of a canyon that never once lets its guard down. 108. Tonga Pagodas. They rise out of the desert in rows, pale and weathered, like something the wind forgot to finish burying. 108 of them, standing together on a stretch of land where almost nothing else does. Nobody who visits forgets the silence here. No trees to rustle, no birds circling, just stone and sand and the low hum of wind moving between the towers. Some of the older monks in the region won't say much about the place. Just that it was built for a reason people don't talk about anymore, and that the number wasn't chosen by accident. Walk the rows at dusk, and the shadows stretch strange, each pagoda casting a shape slightly different from the one beside it, until the whole field looks like it's shifting even when nothing moves. Stand at the center of it, and the desert around you disappears. Just the pagodas, watching, the way they have for centuries. Druk Yerpa. High above the Lhasa Valley, a cliff face is riddled with dark openings. Caves carved into the rock, some barely wide enough for one person to fit through. Monks came here for centuries, seeking nothing but silence. No villages nearby, no easy path up, just bare stone and thin air at an altitude that makes every step feel heavier than it should. Some of the caves go back further than anyone can properly trace. Hollowed out by hand, lived in for years at a time by people who wanted to be forgotten by the world below. The climb up is steep and exposed, loose rock underfoot, nothing to hold onto but the mountain itself. Even now, visitors who make the trek arrive breathless, unsure if it's the altitude or the place itself pressing down on them. Stand at the mouth of one of the caves and look out, and the whole valley spreads below in silence. The kind of quiet that feels older than it should, like it's been sitting there, undisturbed, for a very long time. Houtouwan. From a distance, it still looks like a village. Rooftops, walls, narrow lanes climbing the hillside. Get closer, and none of it looks like a village at all anymore. Green has taken over everything. Vines pour through empty windows, roots crack through door frames, and entire buildings disappear beneath layers of leaves, as if the hillside decided to reclaim what was borrowed from it. People lived here once, whole lives built around these narrow streets. Then, one by one, they left, and the forest didn't wait long to move in behind them. Walk through now, and the silence feels heavier than it should. No voices, no footsteps but your own, just wind moving through leaves that shouldn't be growing where walls used to stand. Some doorways are still passable if you duck low enough, push past the branches blocking the way. Step inside, and it's easy to forget entirely that this was ever meant for people. Stand at the top of the hill and look down, and the whole village seems to breathe, green and swollen, quietly swallowing every trace of the life it once held. Panlong Ancient Road. From above, it doesn't look like a road at all. More like a dragon coiled endlessly across the mountainside, hundreds of bends stacked so tight the pavement seems to fold in on itself. This stretch of the Pamir Plateau climbs into some of the thinnest air on Earth, the road twisting higher and higher until the peaks around it start to feel closer than the valley below. Drivers count the turns as they go, watching the number climb past 100, then 200, some corners doubling back so sharply it feels less like a curve and more like the road folding entirely over itself. This route follows paths people have crossed for centuries, part of an old passage through the mountains long before pavement ever existed here. Traders and herders moving through terrain that never got any easier. Snow closes the road for months at a time. When it opens again, the mountain hasn't softened at all. The same steep grades, the same sheer drops waiting on the other side of every blind turn. Locals who drive it regularly still slow down at certain bends, the ones where the road narrows and the mountain seems to lean in, testing how precisely a vehicle can thread the space it's given. Rain changes the road's temperament almost instantly. What's manageable in dry weather turns unpredictable. Mud loosening beneath the tires, visibility dropping fast as clouds settle low across the pass. Chongqing Dao, Balayang Sky Road. Somewhere above Chongqing, the road stops pretending to be ordinary. It clings to the cliffside instead of running along the ground, cuts straight into rock that drops away completely on one side. Drivers say the first few hundred meters are the hardest. The mind keeps expecting solid ground on both sides, and instead there's just open sky, close enough to feel it through the window. Fog rolls through here without warning, thick enough to erase the road ahead entirely. Headlights catch nothing but white. and for a few seconds there's no way to know what's around the next bend. Locals who've made the drive for years still slow down at certain turns, the ones where the rock juts out just enough to remind you how thin the margin really is between the path and the drop beside it. At night, the road disappears into the dark completely. Just two lines of light hanging in the air, tracing a path along a mountain that most people would rather look at than drive. Mount Eilau. The clouds don't stay above this mountain, they live inside it. Thick, slow-moving fog drifts right through the trees, swallowing the trail a few steps ahead and letting it go a few steps behind. Locals call this range the place where the forest breathes. Moss covers everything: rocks, trunks, the ground itself, soft and damp underfoot, muffling every sound until all you can hear is your own breath. Hikers who've gone deep into these slopes talk about losing all sense of direction. Not lost exactly, just turned around, the way the mist bends distance and makes every ridge look like the one before it. There are stories about hunters who went in at dawn and came out at dusk, certain only an hour had passed. Whether that's true or just something people tell each other, no one really argues about it. Even in daylight, the canopy up here blocks out most of the sun. What's left is a kind of green twilight, beautiful and a little unsettling all at once. Juje Kingdom Ruins. On a high plateau in western Tibet, an entire kingdom sits abandoned, walls of packed earth rising out of the ground like they grew there, tunnels burrowing beneath the surface in every direction. Once, tens of thousands lived within these walls. Now there's only wind, moving through empty doorways and collapsed rooftops, carrying dust across floors no one has swept in centuries. The kingdom vanished almost overnight, the story goes. No long decline, no gradual fading, just an ending sudden enough that historians still argue over exactly what happened here. Underground passages connect parts of the ruins, dark tunnels carved by hand, built for reasons nobody fully agrees on anymore. Some say escape routes, others say something else entirely and don't elaborate further. Climb to the highest point and the plateau stretches out in every direction, empty and vast. The kind of silence that makes it easy to believe something enormous happened here and simply stopped mid-breath without warning. Yumbulagang. On a ridge above the Yarlung Valley, a fortress rises straight out of the rock, its walls the color of the mountain itself, as if the stone simply decided to stand upright. This is said to be the oldest building in Tibet, older than most records can properly confirm, its origins tangled somewhere between history and legend until the two become hard to separate. The climb up is steep, switchbacks cutting into a slope with almost nothing to break the wind, thin air making the ascent feel longer than the distance suggests it should. Locals speak of it as the birthplace of civilization itself here. The first king said to have ruled from exactly this point. looking down over a valley that hasn't changed shape in centuries. Reach the top, and the whole valley opens up below. Fields, river, distant mountains, the same view, more or less, that's greeted everyone who's made this climb for longer than anyone can count. Wind never really stops moving across this ridge. It presses against the old walls day and night, the way it has for as long as the fortress has stood here, refusing to fall. Shuanghe Cave. Beneath the mountains of Guizhou, a network of passages stretches on for what feels like forever, one of the longest cave systems ever mapped, and still, in places, unmapped entirely. Explorers who've gone deep talk about darkness with a weight to it, thick enough that headlamps only carve out a small circle of light before the black swallows everything again. Some chambers open up into spaces large enough to lose all sense of scale, ceilings too high to see, walls too far to touch, just echo and stone stretching outward. Rivers run through parts of the system, carving deeper each year, widening passages that were narrow just decades ago, reshaping the cave from the inside out. Teams mapping the deepest sections still find new branches, new chambers, tunnels curling off into darkness nobody has walked through yet. A system that keeps revealing more of itself the longer people look. Karakoram Highway. They call it the eighth wonder of the world, this road threading through some of the highest, harshest mountains on Earth, peaks stacked on peaks, glaciers hanging close enough to touch the edge of the pavement. Landslides here aren't rare occurrences. They're part of the road's rhythm, boulders and loose rock tumbling down without warning, burying stretches of highway that crews clear out again and again. Drivers talk about the altitude pressing on them long before they reach the highest point, breath shortening, thoughts slowing, the air itself feeling thinner with every switchback climbed. Snow can close sections of the route even in the warmer months, cutting off villages that depend on this single road for nearly everything: supplies, medicine, any connection to the world beyond the mountains. At its highest crossing, the road sits above the clouds themselves, ice clinging to the rock year-round, the silence up there so complete it feels like the mountains are holding their breath. People who've driven the whole stretch say nothing quite prepares you for it. Not the height, not the cold, not the sheer scale of rock rising on every side, dwarfing everything, including the road that dares to cross it. Guanyin Cave. The entrance is easy to miss. A dark seam in the rock face, half hidden by hanging vines, the kind of opening that looks like it wants to stay forgotten. Inside, the air changes almost immediately. Colder, heavier, carrying that mineral smell that clings to places the sun never reaches. Locals speak of the cave carefully, choosing their words the way people do around something they respect more than understand. Offerings are still left near the entrance, small and quiet, without much explanation given to outsiders. Deeper in, the light disappears completely. Just the sound of dripping water somewhere unseen and the feeling that the walls are closer than they actually are. Few go all the way in. Most stop where the last hint of daylight fades from the rock, turn back and carry that darkness with them long after they've stepped outside again. Mount Eilau. The clouds don't stay above this mountain, they live inside it. Thick, slow-moving fog drifts right through the trees, swallowing the trail a few steps ahead and letting it go a few steps behind. Locals call this range the place where the forest breathes. Moss covers everything. Rocks, trunks, the ground itself, soft and damp underfoot, muffling every sound until all you can hear is your own breath. Hikers who've gone deep into these slopes talk about losing all sense of direction. Not lost exactly, just turned around, the way the mist bends distance and makes every ridge look like the one before it. There are stories about hunters who went in at dawn and came out at dusk, certain only an hour had passed. Whether that's true or just something people tell each other, no one really argues about it. Even in daylight, the canopy up here blocks out most of the sun. What's left is a kind of green twilight, beautiful and a little unsettling all at once. Sichuan Tibet Highway. Few roads on Earth demand as much as this one. Over 1,000 kilometers of asphalt, climbing through mountain range after mountain range, each pass higher and colder than the last. Landslides here aren't a possibility. They're a certainty. Somewhere along the route, on any given day, rock is coming down, burying stretches of road that cruise clear just in time for the next one. Drivers cross more than a dozen major passes on this route, some so high the engine itself starts to struggle, air too thin to burn fuel the way it should at sea level. Weather changes without asking permission up here. Clear skies at the base of a pass, then snow and ice by the time you reach the top, then rain again on the other side, all within the same afternoon. Truckers who drive this road for a living talk about the mental toll more than the physical one. Hours of concentration with no room to drift, cliffs on one side, rockfall on the other, for days at a time. Reach the highest points, and prayer flags snap in the wind, strung across passes where travelers have marked the crossing for generations, grateful simply to have made it that far. Shuanghe Cave. Beneath the mountains of Guizhou, a network of passages stretches on for what feels like forever, one of the longest cave systems ever mapped, and still, in places, unmapped entirely. Explorers who've gone deep talk about darkness with a weight to it, thick enough that headlamps only carve out a small circle of light before the black swallows everything again. Some chambers open up into spaces large enough to lose all sense of scale, ceilings too high to see, walls too far to touch, just echo and stone stretching outward. Rivers run through parts of the system, carving deeper each year. widening passages that were narrow just decades ago, reshaping the cave from the inside out. Teams mapping the deepest sections still find new branches, new chambers, tunnels curling off into darkness nobody has walked through yet. A system that keeps revealing more of itself the longer people look. Mount Gonga. Snow never really leaves this peak. Even from a distance, it sits wrapped in white, towering over everything around it like it's daring the sky to come closer. Climbers who've attempted it talk about a mountain that doesn't forgive mistakes. Steep faces, sudden storms, ice that shifts without warning. Every step higher demands a step taken carefully. Locals in the valley below treat the peak with a kind of quiet reverence, rarely speaking of it casually, as if naming it too often might draw its attention. Clouds gather around the upper slopes most afternoons, swallowing the summit whole and leaving climbers stranded in whiteout conditions where up and down start to feel like guesses. Avalanches here don't need much provocation. A shift in temperature, a gust of wind at the wrong angle, and snow that's held steady for days suddenly isn't holding at all. Those who've reached the top describe a silence so complete it presses against your ears. No wind, no movement, just endless white stretching in every direction, and the distant, sobering knowledge of how far there is to fall. Houtouwan. On a splinter of rock rising above the plateau, a fortress crumbles slowly into the mountain it was carved from. Walls half standing, half surrendered to time and altitude. This was once the seat of power out here, the historical capital of a remote frontier region wedged between empires, its ruins still watching over a reservoir far below. Villages nearby empty out for most of the year, herders moving higher into the mountains with their animals, leaving the old town below the fortress nearly silent for months at a time. The climb to reach the ruins isn't long, but the altitude makes it heavier than it should be. Thin air pressing down with every step toward the crumbling stone above. Look east from the fortress walls, and a distant lake catches the light, framed by mountains that have outlasted every empire that ever tried to claim this ground. Houtouwan Mountain. Winter turns this mountain into something almost unrecognizable. Stone steps glazed in ice, pine branches bent white under frost, the whole climb transformed into a slow negotiation with every foothold. Near the summit, a glass platform juts out over a drop, deep enough to make the sea of clouds below look close enough to touch and far enough to make most visitors stop moving entirely. They say this is where Lao Tzu himself once withdrew from the world, high enough, remote enough to leave everything below behind. Locals warn newcomers about the ice long before they warn them about the height. One wrong step on a frozen stair does more damage than any drop ever could. Clouds move fast at this altitude, swallowing the summit one moment and clearing it the next, revealing peaks stacked in every direction like waves that never stopped moving. Stand on that glass platform when the fog finally lifts, and the whole mountain range opens up beneath your feet, vast, silent, and just far enough away to make the ground itself feel optional. H.O. Jill. There's a stretch of the Tibetan plateau so remote, so unforgiving, that locals simply call it the Forbidden Zone. No towns, no roads worth the name, just wind, altitude, and distance in every direction. The air up here is thin enough to make simple movement feel like labor. Even people used to mountains find themselves breathless within minutes, hearts pounding from doing almost nothing at all. For years, poachers moved through this emptiness anyway, drawn by animals found almost nowhere else on Earth. Rangers who patrolled against them did it knowing the isolation cut both ways. Help was hours, sometimes days away. Storms arrive without warning out here, temperatures dropping fast enough to catch even experienced travelers off guard. The kind of cold that doesn't ease up once the sun goes down. It just gets worse. Stand in the middle of it, and there's nothing to break the horizon. No structure, no shelter, nothing human at all. Just wilderness, stretching out until it disappears into the haze. Seal Rock. At Danshire Mountain, a single pillar of rock rises straight up from the ridgeline, its shape so distinct that people have climbed toward it for generations just to stand at the very top. There's no easy way up. The final stretch narrows into bare stone, hands and feet finding whatever grip they can, wind pressing hard against a summit barely wide enough to stand on. Climbers who've made it up talk about the last few meters differently than the rest of the climb. Slower, quieter, every movement checked twice before committing to it. Below, the Danshire formations stretch out in every direction. Red rock carved by centuries of wind and rain into ridges and towers that seem to shift color with the light. Reach the top and there's barely room to turn around. Just enough space to stand, breathe, and look out over a landscape that makes the climb up feel small by comparison. Come back down, and most climbers admit the descent felt harder than going up. Legs shaking, eyes fixed on each handhold, the ground finally solid again only once both feet are back on the trail. Mount Mian. Temples here don't sit on the mountain. They hang from it, red walls and golden roofs, wedged into cliffs so sheer it's hard to tell where the rock ends and the architecture begins. A plank walkway over 1,000 years old still clings to the cliff face, narrow enough that two people passing each other means someone presses flat against the rock and holds their breath. Deep in one gorge, ladders and steps bolt straight into stone above a rushing stream. Rusted metal, the only thing between visitors and a fall that ends somewhere in the water below. Mist rolls through often, thick enough to blur the plank road entirely, turning a 1,000-year-old walkway into something that seems to float, unattached to anything solid. Monks once lived in caves carved into these same cliffs, choosing isolation this extreme on purpose, trading solid ground for silence and a view that stretched out over nothing but air. Lop. Once a lake stretching for miles, now nothing but salt-crusted earth, cracked into patterns that stretch to the horizon in every direction. A sea that simply stopped existing. Locals called it the Wandering Lake because for centuries its shape shifted with the seasons, appearing here one year, drifting there the next. Then, decades ago, it disappeared for good. Temperatures out here swing to extremes few places on Earth can match. Scorching by day, brutally cold by night, with almost nothing alive in between to soften either one. Explorers who've tried to cross it on foot describe a silence unlike anywhere else. No wind through grass, no birdsong, just the crunch of salt crust underfoot and distance that never seems to close. The basin swallowed at least one experienced traveler who tried to walk it alone, and stories like that still circulate quietly among the few who know this desert well enough to respect it. Houtouwan Long Silver Castle. High on a ridge in the far west of Tibet, the remains of a lost kingdom's capital spread across the mountainside. Cave dwellings, fortress walls, and religious structures worn thin by wind and centuries. This was once the seat of power for a civilization few outside the region ever learn about, a kingdom that rose here long before the empires people usually associate with Tibet. Getting here means climbing into thin, punishing air, the altitude alone enough to slow every step, long before the ruins even come into view. Afternoon winds sweep across the ridge hard enough that most visitors know to come early, before the gusts turn the exposed paths between the ruins into something you brace against with every step. Walk among the crumbling walls, and there's a stillness that feels older than silence should. A capital once full of voices, now left to the wind and the handful of travelers willing to make the climb. Kizil Caves. Cut into a cliff face above a dry riverbed, hundreds of caves sit in rows, dark openings staring out over a valley that stayed empty for centuries. Inside, faded paintings still cover the walls and ceilings, colors dulled by time, figures worn thin, but enough left behind to hint at how vivid this place once was. Monks lived and worked in these caves long ago, carving each chamber by hand into rock that offered no shortcuts, no easy tools, just patience stretched across generations. Many of the caves stand empty now, stripped bare by time and by hands that came later, taking pieces of the past and scattering them far from where they belonged. Climb up to the highest openings and the wind moves differently, colder, sharper, carrying dust across floors that haven't felt footsteps in longer than anyone can say. Houtouwan Mountains. This range doesn't just divide the map, it divides the climate itself, north from south, cold from warm, one half of a country split cleanly by a wall of rock and forest. Fog moves through these peaks like it belongs there, drifting between pines thick enough to blur where one mountain ends and the next begins. Deep in the forest, giant pandas still roam terrain few people ever see, moving through bamboo groves, shielded by slopes too steep and remote for most trails to reach. Old paths cut through the range centuries ago, narrow and half forgotten now. Winding past cliffs where a wrong step off the trail disappears into trees and mist with no warning at all. Locals say the mountains have their own weather, changing fast without much notice. Clear skies 1 hour, clouds swallowing the ridgeline the next, the whole range vanishing into grey. Houtouwan interchange. 5 levels of concrete stack on top of each other here, ramps twisting in every direction until the whole structure looks less like a road and more like a knot that refuses to untangle. Locals joke that you can drive in, but you can't necessarily drive out. Not on the first try, not even the second. GPS signals blur under the layers, bouncing between levels that all look the same from inside a moving car. Engineers built it to solve a real problem: too many roads converging in too little space. A city squeezed between mountains and river with nowhere left to spread. The solution was to go up instead, and up again. Drivers say the hardest part isn't the height or the curves. It's the moment you realize you've lost track of which level you're even on, other cars merging in from angles that shouldn't be possible. Seen from above at night, it glows like something alive. Headlights tracing loops through the dark, an entire city's worth of movement folded into 5 stacked layers of concrete and light. Houtouwan. The path winds through dense forest before the trees suddenly break, and the land drops away into a valley so deep the bottom disappears into haze. Locals speak of this place carefully, the way people do about somewhere they respect more than they explain. Few outsiders make the trip, and fewer still stay long once they arrive. Stone markers line parts of the trail, old and weathered, their meaning mostly lost to anyone who didn't grow up nearby. Some say they mark a boundary, others say a warning. Mist settles into the valley most mornings, thick enough to swallow the far side completely, leaving only the near cliff visible and the sound of wind moving through empty space beyond it. By late afternoon, shadows stretch long across the rock, and the whole valley seems to fold in on itself. Quiet, distant, the kind of place that feels like it's kept more than it's ever shown. Hanging Coffin Cemetery. High on the cliff face, wooden coffins rest on beams wedged directly into the rock, suspended far above the ground where no hand could easily reach them. Some have hung there for centuries, weathered grey by sun and rain, swaying faintly when the wind moves through the gorge below. Nobody fully agrees on how they got the coffins up there in the first place. Ropes lowered from the clifftop, scaffolding built and dismantled afterward, maybe something else entirely. The answer disappeared along with the people who did it. Local belief held that placing the dead closer to the sky brought them nearer to the spirits, kept them safe from animals and floodwaters, protected them in a way the ground below never could. Stand at the base and look up, and the coffins seem impossibly placed. Too high, too precarious, resting on ledges barely wide enough to hold them, as if gravity simply agreed to look the other way. Houtouwan Hanging Road. Villagers here spent years cutting a road straight through solid rock, hammering and chiseling by hand until a tunnel emerged along the cliff face, windows opening onto nothing but air and distant valley floor. Before this road existed, the village was reachable only by a narrow stone stairway cut into the mountainside, steep enough that one misstep meant a fall with no second chance. They wanted a way out that didn't depend on luck. So a small group of villagers worked the rock themselves, tool by tool, for over a year, refusing help, refusing to stop. Drive through it now, and the tunnel feels barely wide enough for a single vehicle. Jagged rock brushing close on one side, sheer drop framed by rough-cut windows on the other. What they built wasn't just a road. It was proof that the mountain could be answered back, slowly, stubbornly, one strike of a hammer at a time. Guani Pavilion. Perched on the edge of a cliff, the pavilion seems to hover rather than stand, its wooden beams stretching out over open air with nothing but a sheer drop beneath. Builders raised it centuries ago without modern tools, just rope, timber, and a kind of patience that's hard to imagine now. Every plank hauled up by hand along a path barely wide enough for one person. Wind moves differently at this height. It doesn't just blow past, it pushes, steady and insistent, rattling old wood that has somehow held its ground through storms it was never meant to survive. Visitors who climb up say the last few steps are the hardest, legs tightening, breath catching, the railing feeling thinner with every meter gained. From inside, the world outside disappears into open sky and distant peaks, and for a moment, the pavilion feels less like a building and more like something floating, barely tethered to the mountain at all. Fangman Village. Tucked into the folds of a mountain range, far from any main road, Fangman feels like a place time simply passed over. Wooden houses leaning into the slope, paths worn into the earth instead of paved into it. Getting here means hours on roads that thin out the further you go, until it's just dirt and gravel, switching back through forest so thick the sky barely shows through. Villagers here still live close to the old ways. Fires built the same way they've always been built, rituals passed down without much explanation to outsiders, a rhythm of life that doesn't bend for visitors. Strangers who wander in say there's a stillness to the place that's hard to shake. Not unfriendly, just distant, like the village is watching you as much as you're watching it. Night falls fast in the mountains, and once it does, Fangman goes almost completely dark. No streetlights, no hum of electricity in the walls, just firelight in windows and the sound of the forest pressing in close on every side. Diukou Highway. The road cuts straight through the Tian Shan Mountains, slicing between peaks that seem to close in tighter with every kilometer, until the sky above narrows to a thin strip of blue. Snow lingers here even when the valleys below have gone green. Drivers pass through sunlit gorges 1 minute and into shadowed, half-frozen passes the next, the temperature dropping before the scenery even finishes changing. Some stretches run so close to the rock that the mountain seems to lean over the road itself, and on the other side, the land simply falls away. No barrier, no warning, just distance. Truckers who drive this route talk about the silence between towns. Hours can pass without seeing another vehicle, just switchbacks and cliffs and rivers cutting through the valley floor far beneath the road. Landslides aren't rare here. Locals say you learn to read the mountain a little, the color of the rock, the way loose stone gathers at certain bends. Because up here, the road can change overnight without any warning at all. At the highest points, the air thins and the cold sharpens, and for a while, the highway feels less like a road and more like a narrow seam holding two mountains apart. Dusha Ancient Town Cliff Path. The path here doesn't run beside the cliff, it runs along it, carved into the rock face just wide enough for a single line of footsteps, with the river churning somewhere far below. Stone steps worn smooth by generations wind along the edge, some so narrow that two people can't pass without one pressing flat against the rock. Old traders used to move goods along this route, balancing loads on their backs while keeping one shoulder brushed against the mountain, trusting instinct more than footing. Rain changes everything up here. The stone turns slick, the drop feels closer, and every step becomes a negotiation between where you want to go and where the ground actually lets you. Even now, walking it slow, hand trailing along the rock for balance, there's a moment where the town below disappears from view entirely. Just the path, the cliff, and the long, quiet drop on the other side. 24. Zigzag Road. Look down from the ridge, and the road doesn't look real. 24 bends folded into one mountainside, each turn stacked on the one below it, like something drawn rather than built. Drivers grip the wheel a little tighter here. No shoulder, no room to breathe between turns. Just rock on one side and open air on the other, all the way down. Old-timers in the valley still talk about the trucks that used to crawl this slope in the dead of night. Headlights swinging across the cliff face with every turn, engines groaning like they might not make the next bend. Cliffs, caves, roads folded into impossible shapes, and still only a fraction of what this country is hiding. What ties it together is persistence. People who looked at a mountain with no way through and built one anyway. Some of these places are disappearing, worn down by weather and time. Others are still being climbed and crossed today, exactly as they always have been. If this took you somewhere unexpected, that's the point. Subscribe, and we'll keep digging up the parts of the world the guidebooks skip.